I was recently watching one of my all-time favorite movies. It's a war film from the 1960s. It's called The Guns of Navarone. It's with Gregory Peck, David Niven, Anthony Quinn, all three big heavyweights of classic Hollywood. And, I mean, I will say this, it's fairly long. It's almost 3 hours. And it's got that classic 1960s, war movie, World War II war movie feel. It's got some of those pithy one-liners. It's got the beautiful vistas. It's got, of course, our intrepid heroes fighting against Nazi Germany. And all in all, it's a fantastic movie. I love it. Thankful to my parents for putting me on that when I was a youngster, because I remember the first time watching it. I think it might have been, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 or something or other. It was wondrous to me. And it got me thinking when I was recently rewatching it, why do we not have movies like that anymore? Now, we do have adventure movies and we do have war movies, but now these war movies have an incredible amount of realism in there. And I guess that's probably because, now we're sort of moving away from more, you can't really make like an artsy war film. I guess, you probably could, but perhaps the popular conception, it wouldn't do fairly well outside of those, independent or art circles. But I recall something that François Truffaut, the French film director, said in an interview with Gene Siskel. I'll read it for you now. This was in 1973 when he said this, on Remembrance Day, no doubt. He said, "I find that violence is very ambiguous in movies. For example, some films claim to be anti-war, but I don't think I've really seen an anti-war film. Every film about war ends up being pro-war." Now, of course, I think he's completely correct. You have these films such as All Quiet on the Western Front, both the 1930s version and the most recent one that came out, both fantastic films, by the way. It's even better novels. You also have, there was one that Stanley Kubrick did, one of his first ones, called Paths to Glory, or Paths of Glory, with Kirk Douglas in there. Also another World War I film as well. And again, those are sort of the biggest examples that I've got of it being a quote-unquote like an anti-war film. But again, I think the reason why Truffaut is right is because you end up sympathizing with the individual soldiers in there, and we don't necessarily end up walking away thinking, both sides embracing. If anything, at least this is what I get from it. Whenever I watch a war film, it's hard not to get swept up in that sentiment, because you're following these characters and you're thinking, okay, well, I want to see them win. Just like with any movie, when you're following your protagonist, or let's say your hero, especially if it's an adventure movie or whatever, you want to see them overcome that obstacle. You want to see them win. People love winners. And that's why I think there's never a truly anti-war film. I think as close that you could get probably in the modern sort of era without it being too heavy-handed is possibly The Thin Red Line by Terrence Malick. But even then, it's hard not to get caught up in the spectacle of it all. I think that's what Truffaut was trying to say. And I think it's very, very relevant. If you see a movie what are some recent ones? Fury by David Ayer, Top Gun Maverick is a fantastic example of that one. It's a really well-polished film. It's a fun film to watch. But again, we get so caught up in the spectacle of it that the underlying message is, even if it is an anti-war message, that sort of gets sidetracked because ultimately maybe it's something that we don't necessarily want to talk about. And I think that the reason why I wanted to discuss this today is because this is going to be kind of a weird thought, so bear with me. I think that the reason why that anti-war message sort of gets lost within the spectacle is because there's something within each and every one of us that's awakened. I don't know if it's bodily thing, if our adrenaline gets pumping whenever we see that all this excitement, all this violence, or whatever. And I think that it taps into something very, very primordial within the human system. The human system, of course, being our body, our brains, how we think. And this might sound like a little bit depressing, but I think it's for those reasons specifically that, we can never really have an anti-war film, if that makes sense, because like as much as war is terrible, and as much as a lot of people die, a lot of people get hurt, there's so much collateral damage with it. It's never something that we're ever really going to eliminate. Like, you can't eliminate violence from existence, as much as some people would like to try to. I'm not saying that it's something that we should not aspire to. However, I don't necessarily think it's going to be completely unrealistic. Or rather, I should say, I don't think it's going to be completely realistic to ever truly eliminate it, because there's many different forms of violence. And I think that that's what war films sort of, they show us. They show us that, okay, well, there are these, like, within this carnage, if you will, there are heroes that emerge, these phoenixes that are reborn. What you were before is stripped away, and it's not necessarily that you become something better, but you become something different. We see that change in real time, I guess. A great example would be, of course, in another Stanley Kubrick film, Full Metal Jacket, when you see the final, and sorry for spoiling it for you if you haven't seen it, but when you see in the final scene with Matthew Modine's character Joker having to execute the opposing soldier, you see it in real time. He gets that 1,000-yard stare, and he's crossed that boundary. And it's not necessarily a glorious sentiment, and you're not, in essence, cheering him on for having went on that journey. I think ultimately what it is that, okay, we're rooting for him is because we've now, throughout the film, we've seen him become, phony, go from being phony, tough, and crazy brave into really tapping into such a part of himself that we almost are not sure, like, okay, is this actually who he was? Was all that, was all the jokes and stuff just surface level? Did he not really know who he was? So I know this is kind of a little bit all over the place, so I'll probably put a pin in it there. But why I think every film about war ends up being pro-war is because, again, the anti-war message gets lost in the spectacle because we get excited over it. It's the animal part of our brain, and that's completely normal. That's a normal reaction. But I think it also offers us an opportunity to look into ourselves and to say, and to look at our reaction to a film and say, okay, if we're not sickened by this, and if we get excited by it, can we ever really hope to truly eliminate this? And if we do eliminate violence by any means, and if we eliminate all forms of violence, is that a good thing, or are we losing an opportunity to learn a part of ourselves that we didn't know about previously? It's a little bit of a weird thought, and I am by no means advocating to go out and start beating people up or committing violence or anything like that. I thoroughly condemn that. But when we do watch these violent films, or these war films, if you will, I think we can learn a lot about ourselves by our reaction to it. So it's something that I wanted to talk about today, and it's a discussion I would hope to foster at the very least, with my audience and down in the comments. So I'll put a pin in it there at the risk of rambling. Please let me know what your thoughts were by dropping a like on the video and a comment down below. Do you watch war films? If so, what's your favorite war film? Better yet, name me your top 3. And if you don't like war films, please tell me what's the aversion to it. Is it the violence? Is it the underlying message? Or is it because of how it makes you feel? In any event, thanks again for all the support. Drop a like on the video and a comment down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.